Hello everyone and welcome to the Good Old Gamer. So today we're going to chat about why it is that I'm going through testing all of these CPUs and bringing this information to you. This is something that's actually come up quite a lot in the comment sections. Why bother doing these tests and things like that, and I wanted to address some of the questions and concerns there. First off, I want to explain what my goal is here with the Good Old Gamer, and the goal always has been figuring out what brings the absolute maximum performance at the absolute lowest price, giving you the maximum value for your PC gaming builds. And sometimes to do that, I have to go out and do the testing myself because the information simply does not exist out in the wild right now. So that was actually one of the big things that led me to this. Once I did the test comparing the Intel Core i7 5960X and seeing that beat a Ryzen 7 3700X, that blew my mind. I was not expecting that. I was expecting the AMD chip to win pretty handedly, but I figured maybe the 5960X would get close. Well, that wasn't the case, and well, that just kind of got me down a rabbit hole of investigating what's going on here. How come this chip from 2014 was able to compete with a 2019 chip? Well, come to find out, the testing methodologies from a lot of the mainstream reviewers are a bit flawed. Now, a lot of people will get defensive. Oh, well, what are you saying? You know better than these guys? No. What it is they leave out basically real-world overclocking numbers from their reviews. Or they pair their CPUs with RAM that simply doesn't make sense for them, and you get different results. Not saying that the numbers that are put out are bad, but they're the numbers using the hardware that they say that they're using. Although some of these outlets also don't tell you what hardware that they're using. So I kind of found this a bit sketchy, and I was like, okay, the more I looked into this, the more I realized there's a lot of extra performance out there that people aren't tapping into. As we saw with my 3700X test. So we had the stock version running with 3200 C16, just basic bare bones memory, and then taking that up to 4.5 gigahertz at 3733 with CL14. So just spending a little bit extra on some better RAM net us 20% more performance. This is monumental here. And the fact that I, as a PC enthusiast and somebody who actually talks about this on the internet, did not know that this much performance was left on the table, let me know that most of you guys also did not know that this is a thing. And as mentioned, this led me down a rabbit hole. I started talking a lot with Ivan over at Frame Chasers. This is something he's been saying for a while now. He's been trying to wake people up and going, there's more here, guys. You're missing the point. These tests that you're seeing, while those may be the legit numbers, they're kind of taken out of context. And that's the best way that I could probably phrase it, is that you don't have the context of which CPU is actually better without having basically a baseline and then basically a maximum value. And that's why on the test that I'm doing, I have the stock performance, which I polled you guys on the RAM. So this way I got your consensus of what you think stock RAM is. Use that. Use the stock configuration of the CPU. So that's just load BIOS defaults and then XMP to 3200. That's basically all I'm doing here. That's what most of you guys do at home. However, now you can see if you take the time, like I said, if you get yourself the proper memory kit, a Samsung B-Die kit, you can go ahead and achieve numbers more in line with this. Now, granted, your overclock number here may not be the same, but it's the memory that's doing most of the heavy lifting on this performance increase. So on the i3-12100, for example, this is all memory because I can't overclock the CPU at all. If you guys remember, that's an 11.4% increase going from 3200 C16 just up to 3600 C14. Now, granted, timings are a little bit more tight than that, but I put all that information in the description if you guys want to see more detailed on what settings I'm using. And what this does is it gives you the information. If you don't want to tune, you just want to buy the cheapo RAM, you have that option. You can see the sort of performance level that you're getting. But if you want to go ahead and, like I said, spend a couple bucks extra, it's only like $10, $20 more to get the Samsung B-Die kit over just a cheap 16 gig kit of RAM. I know I keep harping on the RAM, but it really is the key to unlocking any DDR4's potential. So any system using DDR4, I just can't recommend using any other RAM than a Samsung B-Die kit at this point, as the numbers are proving that it's invaluable. It makes a big difference. So now you guys, if you are in the market and you're looking at trying to buy something, you have both sets of numbers. So you can kind of determine what makes the most sense for you. And as a channel that's really trying to show you guys how much value you can get out of things, I need some sort of baseline. So I was going to use the Ryzen 7 3700X as a baseline number, and we could compare other CPUs off of that, like the i3 12100, the upcoming i7 5960X, which I'll be revisiting. And then my buddy, he was going out of town, and I got access to his system, and he had a 5800X. So I figured, why not just do the same thing with that? And this will become basically the de facto baseline. This is a much more expensive CPU than I would ever recommend for anybody using for gaming because, well, as you can see here, you don't really need this level of performance. And in all honesty, a 5600 or a 5600X at the same speeds, if you can get them there, will perform virtually the same. Now, compared to something like the i3 12100, which is a $99 CPU, you now have the data, if you go with stock configuration or a tuned configuration, that how well this will compare to something like a 5800X, which is still a $300-ish CPU. So if you don't want to spend this kind of money, how much performance are you really sacrificing? And in this case, it's not a lot, but you have the data to figure that out. So it's become really clear that you need to tune and overclock your system to extract the absolute maximum value out of it. Taking something like an i3 12100 to being worse than a stock 5800X to beating it. That is very impressive for what took me a few hours. Now, granted, it does take a little while and there really aren't any guides out there. A lot of people have been asking me, hey, can you make like a video on how to do this? Unfortunately, it can't be done. It's going to be different for every single motherboard and every single CPU. So it would have to be like, if you have this motherboard and this CPU and this RAM, then this will work for you. It's really just trial and error, guys. If you do want some help, there are communities out there. If you're a member of the Good Old Gamer family, so if you support by hitting the little join button down below or on Patreon, I do help you guys out in there. I have a little section for that. Now, any guides that you find out there, or basically any community, they're going to have their guides tailored towards Samsung B-Die because it is the best. And like I said, it's not that much more expensive. So if you do want to go ahead and get into this and you're like, well, I'm going to just try to use my RAM, none of that stuff's going to work. Your memory just does not scale the same. The reason why it's so good is you can pump it all the way up to 1.5 volts and get insane numbers and it will still work. It'll work just fine. Other RAM cannot do that. It cannot go all the way down. I have my kit running at 2667 at C11. It'll do that, but it'll also go all the way up to 4000 C16, which isn't great, but I was able to get 3833 at C14. So these are insane numbers, and guys in my community's got them up to 4933 at C17. So you can go all the way down and all the way up to figure out what works best for your particular system. So that's the main reason why I'm really trying to bring this to light. I don't know any other reviewer or tech site or anybody else other than Ivan that says throw away the junk RAM and get yourself a proper kit, and that's step one. So I really kind of wanted to hammer that home, that really is step one for getting the most out of your system. And considering DDR4 is not going to go anywhere anytime soon, I know AM5 is coming out, but let's be honest, not many of you guys are going to adopt that, and it's going to take a long time before DDR5 is on performance parity, let alone price to performance. It's going to be a very long time. I would suggest 2 to 3 years before even jumping into a DDR5 platform, as you can get great RAM that's going to last for a long time. Now, the other thing that I want to do with this series is to show you guys, well, you just don't need crazy performance. Speaking of AM5, there's all sorts of rumors and leaks and this and that. AMD's sandbagging. No, they're not. It doesn't even matter. I'm going to go back to the chart here. So this is the 7-game average from the last video that I did. So we've only tested 3 CPUs here, and we already have 3 configurations that are hitting over 120 FPS on the 1% low. So this means you could basically do 120 hertz locked, and let's be honest, even with 144 hertz, that's still going to be plenty. Now, you could even get away with these guys down here with a VRR display. It would be just fine. So what are we really talking about here? If you can get 120 to 144 hertz gaming on these CPUs, what's the point of buying anything faster? And that's a real question that needs to be asked. Is it even worth it at this point in time? Just jumping over here to the channel, I did a few polls a few weeks ago. So here's the 3200, just so you guys can see. Yep, that's a real thing. And then down here, I said, what frame rate do you target for most of your games? And we have 14% sub 60. That's actually way higher than I expected. I figured most people would be targeting at least 60, but hey, a good chunk of you guys are not. Then we have 60 to 90. Obviously, that was going to be the winner. Most people are there. And then 34% at 120, 144, 165. That sort of range. So what we consider to be high refresh. Only 3% of you guys actually care about anything beyond this range. So that means 97% of you guys are just fine with 120, 144 FPS on down. And that's the main reason why I focus on the 1% lows in my benchmarks versus a lot of other people will focus on averages. Averages do not tell you how good the gaming experience is going to be. The 1% low gives you a pretty clear picture. If you're hitting 120 FPS on the 1% low or higher, high refresh is definitely attainable on that particular CPU, at least in the games tested. Granted, you can't test all the games in the world. Nobody's got the time for that. And Steve from Hardware Unboxed is the only guy who goes up to like 40, 50 games. I do admit that 7 games really isn't enough to paint the best picture. It was supposed to be 8, but Assassin's Creed Valhalla just was GPU bound, even at 720p medium on a 3060. So I was like, well, these are useless for what we're trying to do here, so I threw that out. So what I decided to do is I'm going to do a 14 game test. Now, this also ties into a lot of people going, well, you're being bottlenecked by your 3060. Well, there's a reason why I ran 720p medium, is because all the other games tested, that's not the bottleneck. I'm just going to let you guys know that is not bottlenecking an RTX 3060. But I also have access to my buddy Austin's RTX 3090 while he's away. So I was like, all right, we're going to jump up to 14 games, which is going to give you a much bigger sample size. And we're going to use the RTX 3090 at 1080p with high settings instead. Games that support DLSS, I'm still using DLSS because we need to get the GPU away from the situation as much as possible. I did go ahead and double check the numbers because I've already run through on most of the configurations with the 3090. The numbers that I'm providing to you guys, they're the same. The 3060 was not the bottleneck there. So if you were concerned about that, that is a non-issue. So overall, why I'm doing these tests is to take a look at the sub $200 CPU market for the most part and figure out which ones make the most sense, what offers you the most value. And to do that, we need to go ahead and look at fully tuned systems, or mostly fully tuned. I know somebody will be like, well, you could technically get a little bit more out of this. Whatever. I'm tuning them enough that it's going to be at or above where most people will be able to get them. But it should be something attainable by the vast majority of you guys if you put the time in. And that's the reason why I'm doing this. I'm spending thousands of dollars to show you guys what you don't need to spend your money on. You don't need to spend your money on very expensive CPUs for gaming. You can get away with much, much less. Now, if you do productivity or other things, that's on you. Go look at productivity benchmarks and that sort of stuff, and there you go. But I did a poll, another poll, and you guys said 75% of you just want a game box. And that's who I'm making content for, is the overwhelming majority of PC gamers that literally don't do anything else on their PC but play video games and browse the internet, maybe some light office work. That's the overwhelming majority of people. Most people do not work on their PCs at home. I know that's hard for the people that do that to understand, but most people don't do that. And this content is showing you can get away with something very, very inexpensive, like the i3-12100 or something like the 5960X, which will be coming on Sunday's video. That's a big one. I'm actually going to do a live stream next Monday afternoon because a lot of people are going to be like, whoa, what's going on? This doesn't make any sense. The numbers are that startling and amazing that I need to do a live stream to chat with you guys about it the next day. So if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, make sure you do so. I'm super excited to bring that one. And yeah, that's one of the main reasons why I'm like, I need to bump up the games. Nobody's going to believe this if I just do the 7 games, which will be on Sunday's video. But yeah, even with 14 games, the numbers you're going to see are pretty darn accurate. So I'm really excited to show you guys this stuff, and hopefully I can save you guys from buying things that you don't really need. So for example, if you have an old Zen 2 CPU, just get that extra 20% out of it and you're probably going to be fine if you need a little extra bump. Instead of buying a whole new CPU, whole new platform, if you are starting from scratch, there is no better value than the i3-12100. I'm just going to ruin the punchline at the end. Nothing beats that for the money. It is definitely the cheapest thing you can do right now. AMD does have an interesting competitor out there that I completely forgot about because the mainstream reviewers threw it into the trash as being no good, but that'd be the Ryzen 5 5500, which is a Cezanne-based CPU, 6-core, 12-thread. They're only $140. And considering the AMD boards can be had a little bit cheaper, this will put it pretty close to the i3 12100 in terms of pricing for CPU and motherboard. And obviously I recommend using the B die, so the RAM cost to be the same. But that CPU right there may actually have a lot more under the hood than people think, as the F clock or the Infinity Fabric clock on the APUs can go significantly higher than the chiplet-based CPUs. It is monolithic, which also has latency advantages, so that can make up for its lack of cache and a bunch of other things. So I'm really interested to see how the APUs from AMD, which effectively is what the 5500 is, can compare to the non-APUs. And theoretically, they could be as fast, if not faster, if properly tuned. So that's a good option from AMD, I believe, but I haven't tested it yet. So that's kind of what I want to do. I want to check these things out and go, yeah, all you really need to get like 5800X level performance is buy this $140 CPU. If that's a thing that interests you, it does to me. So that's what I'm trying to do here. I hope this makes sense, bringing this out just to kind of clarify a few things. So if you guys were on the fence being like, well, what are you doing here? What's the point? Hopefully you now have a good idea there. And if you want to help support the work, like I said, I've already invested a few $1,000s into getting this started. It's going to take thousands more to go. So if you do want to help out, you can go ahead and click the little join button down below. Go ahead and join over on Patreon. All that helps out, and you get access to the Discord and you can chat with me directly, ask questions on the Techonomics podcast, get after hours Techonomics podcast, and usually I'm in there chatting with the guys most of the time anyway. So a lot of benefits for helping out. I want to thank you all for your support. All the guys out there, you guys have been really great. Most of you guys really do want to see this sort of stuff. You want to see the baseline and max tune settings, so this way you have a pretty good idea and can have it all in a nice coherent chart. And the community support's been great. It just, half the community, I would say, is a bit confused by this because this is different than what the mainstream guys do because, well, I don't know why. It's just different. And, you know, different's usually hard for people to understand. So hopefully it's a little bit clearer. That's really all I have for you guys in this video. Super excited for Sunday's video. Make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell. You do not want to miss that. It is eye-opening to see how ridiculous some of these old HEDT platforms really are. So, alrighty guys, looking forward to seeing you guys there, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.